So iDubbbz a couple days ago made a video where he apologized for some of his past actions and that he's like taking effort to grow and change, and he's not fully there yet, but he's making progress. And today I was not really going to necessarily comment on that video. I was going to talk about Penguin0 Moist Critical's response to that video, because there was some weird takes that happened. So this video is going to consist of me talking about two videos that Moist Critical made. His first video, his initial reactions to the iDubbbz apology, and then his response to the reaction he received for his thoughts about the iDubbbz situation, whatever. So this first clip is in response to iDubbbz saying that he views his past videos, his content cops and stuff like that, as hurtful and damaging to certain communities of people for the slurs and stuff that he used.
Those videos, like, they're not hurtful, nor do I really think they're damaging. Now, you could make an argument that they are hurtful to the people they were about, like the content cop on Tana or Leafy or any of that. You could say, like, you know, he hurt their feelings or sent harassment their way, which may have been a mental burden on them, and you could feel bad about that, I suppose. But at the end of the day, I don't think the goal of his content was ever to be hurtful or damaging. He was just trying to entertain and using edginess as shock humor, which for its time was acceptable.
And this response that Charlie gives is like kind of weird, because it's like, I could see why you might think it was cruel the way that you went about talking about the people you made the videos about, but it was just edgy slurs. Like, yeah, it's cringe and wrong, but it's not hurtful. Slurs in any context is hurtful. If you have like millions of subscribers and you have millions of people watching your videos, and one of the primary ways you communicate humor is through by just saying stuff that is bigoted or racist or homophobic, that is hurtful. Like, regardless of what time it was, regardless if it's 2016 and that's the norm on YouTube, it's still hurtful. If I say a slur, it's still as harmful as if I say that slur, but 20 other people also said that slur. It's still hurtful.
In your 30s and really any age over 16, you're not exactly going to be getting a hearty ho 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 belly laugh just hearing a bunch of slurs being spammed. Real life isn't Call of Duty lobbies. I don't think many people in the real world are going to be like laughing and fist pumping hearing you just shout slurs as comedy. So that makes sense to look back on that and cringe. However, none of your videos came from a place of hate. At least I don't think so. I don't think you were ever a racist or a bigot.
That clip is in response to iDubbbz being like, you know, like, what I did was still unacceptable. Like, casual bigotry is still bigotry. Casual racism is still racism. And then Charlie goes to respond pretty much saying that, like, yeah, using the slurs is cringe, but I don't think he was ever a racist. Like, I don't think that was ever your intention. And it's a very common thing for white people. I used to do this too. It was like about the intentions behind the words that was said, but that's not how that works. Like, for example, the N-slur, right? The N-word. The way that was used historically, it stripped black people, enslaved black people, and then after they was freed, it still stripped them of their humanity. If you went back to like the 1700s and you went up to like the average white person and you asked, do you think black people are human? The answer would be no, that they subhuman, and they wouldn't use the term black people. The designation that they used for black people was the N-slur, was the N-word. It is directly tied to stripping away the humanity of black people. That was its primary use. Back in the 1800s, the 1900s, whatever, it was used, the N-slur was used instead of pronouns like he, she, they. They used the N-slur in place of that. White people use the N-slur in place of that, in place of the black person's name, in place of a pronoun, in place of anything that we do that designates someone's humanity. They use that word. They use that slur. So I don't care what your intention is. No one cares what your intention is. If you still use that term, it's still cruel. It's still hateful. It's still racist. And this next clip is in response to iDubbbz pretty much being like, I cultivated like a bad audience, and like I didn't like those people. Like, they was bad people.
The vilifying of your own audience and your previous content, I don't think is the right way of even looking at the content you used to make or the audience that you had. Of course there were bad actors in there, but not everyone was. And to make them feel like they were if they liked your content is a little weird. And I don't think that's the goal of this video by any means, but it does come across that way.
Which is such a weird reaction. To see someone being like, I used racist language, homophobic language, sexist language, and that allowed for bigoted people to feel comfortable watching my videos, comfortable in my community, very prominent in my community. And I don't like those type of people that enjoy that. To hear someone say that and go, you know, it's kind of wrong to like vilify your community. What? What? The term vilification implies that whatever description you've given to that person is unjust. But if you made content where you said racist things, bigoted things, and that your audience either A, liked to hear those things, thought that stuff was funny, or B, excused it and ignored it, that's not a vilification of your community to say, wow, y'all either liked racism or was comfortable with racism. And again, he didn't say it was everyone in his audience, because he don't know, but he said like there was a huge chunk of these people. Like, what do you mean that's a vilification? That's just describing the audience that he had, because he did have that. I remember back in school, when I was in school, I watched iDubbbz, right? I watched iDubbbz, and I used slurs. I said slurs. I made bigoted jokes. Now, some of it did come from a place of like a defense mechanism, because I got called slurs. For some reason, everyone knew that I was trans or gay, whatever, before I could admit it to myself. And so I got called a bunch of slurs, and a lot of times by like more popular people. So I thought I was like weird and like wrong for who I was. And that if I wanted to be liked and acceptable, I had to push that stuff aside and play into the bigotry to be accepted and liked. Now, that is not an excuse for my behavior. It's a reason, but it's not an excuse. I still said bigoted things, racist, homophobic, sexist, transphobic things. That's not cool. And part of my justification for like the things I was doing, because there was cognitive dissonance, I felt bad for doing it, but I thought that's what I had to do. I would use iDubbbz like videos and like videos like that as justification, like in my own head for saying those things. Like I remember in school, there was definitely kids that like watched iDubbbz and used him as a justification for not only saying slurs, but like they're more racist beliefs, they're more bigoted beliefs. And that was like one of the main reasons they liked iDubbbz, is because he said those slurs. Again, maybe not the whole audience, but I directly remember people doing that. And again, that's anecdotal. I don't know the stats on that, but I've seen that happen. So it's not a vilification of the audience to be like, you know, a good chunk of y'all was bigoted and liked bigotry.
Be fucking publicly flogged with tomatoes thrown at you for the rest of your life and skinned alive because you made edgy videos in 2016, man. It's just not that big of a deal. It feels horrible hearing this from him, knowing that it weighs so heavily on his mind that he made these videos, so he feels like he's a real piece of shit for doing it. You just made edgy YouTube videos. You didn't ruin anybody's life. You didn't create a fucking army of racists and bigots. The content itself isn't bigoted content.
I don't know if that's necessarily accurate, because okay, maybe he didn't create them like racist or whatever, but he emboldened them for sure. Oh, for sure. Like, I know Charlie doesn't have experience. He's an adult. He didn't experience this. But I really feel bad for like my black peers that like grew up around, like had to go to school around this, because not obviously iDubbbz did not invent racism, but he emboldened them, right? He emboldened racists, especially young children, to be racist, to say racist things, to use slurs. iDubbbz's catchphrase was a combination of the N slur followed by the F slur. The amount of people I heard in school that would say that and repeat that, who would call black people that. And again, I was not someone who was like innocent. I also use that as justification for doing that. I made black people uncomfortable, black children uncomfortable growing up. Now, yes, I was their age, but regardless, that's not acceptable. I'm like, I've made many attempts to apologize and like hold myself accountable for that behavior, whether it was online or in person, you know what I mean? It don't change the fact I did it, right? And that's what iDubbbz is doing. He's recognizing that he did this and it had an impact on people and it affected people's real lives, especially children, young trans children, young gay children, young black children. All of these groups had to deal with the consequences of iDubbbz's actions. Now, yes, iDubbbz is not the mastermind of the universe. He's not the sole perpetrator of this, but he participated in this system, in this feedback loop of people feeling emboldened by racism to be racist. And it's a cycle that just continues, right? And he's apologizing for his place in that. There's not anything wrong with that.
But it just, it doesn't strike me as something that was genuinely ruining people's lives hearing that kind of shit. It's just kind of like an eye-rolling thing to look back on now, like, ugh, that's fucking lame.
I understand Charlie's not super well informed about like the lives of high schoolers or even the effects of racism, you know? But if you know that you're not the most knowledgeable on a topic, why would you make a whole video on it? Because the energy of this video kind of gives me the vibe of, I can excuse racism, but what I will not condone is an apology for racism. And I understand that's a bit hard, because I don't think that's necessarily what Charlie's doing, right? He don't necessarily condone racism, but he did give excuses for it. He did soften it by saying it's just edgy humor. It's still racism. Regardless if it was culturally prevalent at the time, it's still racism. And if someone wants to apologize for said racism, I don't know why you would really be like, huh, you know, I have some thoughts. I have some critiques of your apology, because I think you apologize too much. Now, there is more to this. Charlie did make another video in response to that, where he do like concede that he was wrong on a few things, but he also doubles down on certain things.
So to explain what I meant, when I'm saying I don't think the apology was warranted, I'm saying I don't think him being a product of edgy internet culture is necessarily something that should have been weighing on his mind so heavily for the last fucking 7 years, that he's lived with this constant guilt, this burden on his shoulders, where he's feeling as though he created edgy internet culture. The way he talked about in this video really made me feel very bad for him, that he's had this kind of looming disgust at the man he used to be.
I don't think the iDubbbz apology video was him being like, I created all racism online. It was more of him recognizing that because of his like size and popularity, his impact was very great. He recognized that he played a part in that, and he feels that he should own up for that. And if he feels guilty about that, like, that's okay. It's okay to feel guilty for things, especially if you do them. I don't know why, like, all of a sudden we feel bad for white people when, like, they said racist things and they felt guilty about it. Like, that was something that I experienced, because when I apologized for, like, racist jokes in the past that I made or something like that, I would get white people that would say things like, you shouldn't feel guilty. You shouldn't feel like you need to apologize. What? I can feel guilty. Secondly, why? Why should I not feel like I did something wrong? Why should I be babied and coddled when I did something that negatively impacted people? Now, yeah, it's important that I decenter myself from like the whole thing, so I don't like just project this white fragility onto people and then like make black people uncomfortable with that. Like, it's important that I apologize, state what I did that was wrong, talk about what I was going to do better, and then do those actions and not linger on it. I shouldn't put my guilt and offload that onto black people. But like, that's not what I was doing. That's not what you was doing by feeling guilty. It's okay to like feel like you did something wrong. It's just bad when it's like performative. I don't know, like, it's a very common thing to coddle white people. Like, white people will coddle other white people about their past racism. You can feel bad for being racist in the past. What the fuck? If I walked up to my friend and I just insulted them, I just picked at their insecurities, just fucking tore them apart, I would feel bad. I would feel bad afterwards. I should feel bad for that afterwards, because that's a shitty thing to do. So why is we all of a sudden switching up when it comes to racism? I said things that made people uncomfortable, that hurt them, especially the younger the person is, especially the fact, like, a lot of us was when I was in high school or middle school, to other people my age. For them to experience that, especially at such a developmental age, that hurts. That leaves an impact. And I was not trying to conflate queerness or transness with being like black or whatever, because obviously black trans people cis, whatever, right? Like I was not trying to do that. But like I did experience bigotry growing up in the forms of like homophobia and transphobia. It hurt. It made me repress those parts of myself growing up, and it made me very unhappy. It made me have really shitty thoughts about myself. And I've talked to a lot of my black friends about this stuff. Like majority of my friends are black. I talked to them about this, and they've talked about their experience growing up with me. Again, this is anecdotal, but from what I've heard, I don't have this experience, but growing up black around white people can fucking suck. Like it is soul crushing. It's like the thing of like W. Du Bois talks about with like, I freaking forgot his term for it, but like you have like the two parts of you or whatever. Like that concept. Like that's crushing. That's soul crushing. We shouldn't call out white people about that. That's my main point. I went off on a tangent, but still, just weird that we do that. Just really weird.
So when I said I don't think the apologies warranted, what I mean is I don't think what he did was so damaging and scarring to the online space or individuals that for 7 years he's needed to carry this guilt where he felt obligated to finally apologize for it.
Again, that's a weird assumption to make about how he feels. I didn't get the impression when I watched the iDubbbz apology that he felt obligation to do it out of like I felt that he wanted to do it to make up for it, to hold himself accountable, and to directly say to those people, I was sorry and I was trying to make up and do better and be a better person. It's fine if he feels obligated. But also, you don't know what he feels. A lot of the assumption was based on how he felt. You don't know how iDubbbz felt. And this next part is where Charlie pretty much is like, you know, like I wasn't young at that age. I wasn't at that impressionable age. I wasn't hanging around like those young impressionable people who would have been influenced heavily by that sort of rhetoric, that racist rhetoric, that and all other types of bigoted rhetoric that he used.
I also failed to recognize that in 2016, I was still in my fucking 20s, which is sad to think that I'm basically a fossil now. I wasn't a child during this period, so I don't know what effect this might have had on younger viewers of his. Maybe I'm very wrong in that it did serve as like a fucking gateway drug into racism or something. That is possible. I don't know. And that's what a lot of people did point out that I think is a great point. I was already old enough to recognize that he was never advocating for legitimate racism or bigotry or anything like that. That was never his message.
So it's good that he like recognizes that, but again, he then goes into like, it wasn't his real message or I was able to recognize that. I was able to divorce it, like the racism from like the other parts of the video, the bigotry from the other parts of the video. But like, also part of the reason you could do that is because like he's white. You know what I mean? Yeah, of course you can divorce it because none of that stuff was about you.
Things meant to entertain, but in doing so, you delivered some bad shit along the way with the edgy shock slurs that were thrown in so loosey-goosey throughout the content. But I don't think that changes the actual message of what the video meant to convey. And it was never a message of cruelty. It was always a message of, these people are doing bad, and these are people in very influential positions who probably shouldn't be.
I find it strange that that's the distinction he made, because iDubbbz is also one of those people who was in a position of influence, who was doing things that was criticizable. And what iDubbbz is doing is criticizing his past self, his past actions, and apologizing for it. iDubbbz is doing like the same thing that Charlie's pointed out here, except towards himself, about racism. And iDubbbz himself says that from his view, it was cruel to use racism and like bigotry as a joke. Not a joke about racism or about bigotry, to just straight be racist and call that a joke. And you can't divorce the fact that he was using all this language to criticize other people. It was cruel. It's cruel to use slurs. It is a cruel action. Regardless of what the main intent of the video is, he was doing cruel things in the video. Who cares if his intention was to be cruel? He still did it.
I'm most likely wrong about this. I saw the content when I was in my 20s. I could see the satire in it. I assume the majority of other people could, but I didn't even take into consideration that a lot of the viewers were younger.
And I'm saying I don't understand why Charlie's looking at this and being like, oh, like, nah, the satire, like, I understand why he looks at. He's never really looked at race. He's never really had to, and like how that impacts his life and how that impacts the things he says. Whatever. I don't give a fuck if you say the N slur, or the F slur, or the T slur, or any other slur for that matter, as satire. You still said the slur. You still did the bigotry. Like, what? But like, also, that's not what satire is, Charlie. Do you know what satire is? Satirizing something is critiquing it through the form of comedy, you know, to like really embody what they're doing. Like that's what it is. Using slurs as a joke, saying a slur and just the slur being the punchline, what is that satirizing? Because that seems to me just like being racist and being like, that was funny. That's not satire. That is just being racist and finding it funny. And before some weirdo is in my comment saying, stop trying to cancel Charlie, or da-da-da-da-da, it's a criticism. It's criticism. That person who commented that probably likes Charlie's videos where he criticizes other people. That person commented probably liked iDubbbz Content Cops. Why I can't criticize someone that you like? Oh, that's so sad. Like, I want to make it very clear. I wasn't trying in the video to paint Charlie as like racist or anything like that. But I was more so critiquing the way that he excuses racism. That he turns a blind eye to it. That he looks past it. How he himself is complicit in racism because he ignores it. Or he'll give it a pass. Because it's edgy. It was edgy 2016 humor. Okay? It was still bad. There were still plenty of people that was like, that was bad. Anyways, yeah, that's the video. Have a good day. Bye-bye.